Hello there, and welcome to my fifth volume of music that's my favorite here. Now, I've been a fan of Level 42. Well, I wouldn't say fan, but an admirer of theirs, hardly a fanatic. I don't know if you use that word, Level 42, since about, 2004 or 5, since I was kind of first starting to use internet and streaming and listening to their music. Now, I knew them for one song, Something About You from 1985, but these two albums, this is a series of 4 twofers which I have, Level 42, since I wanted most, or not all, of their 80s catalog. In the beginning, they weren't a pop-influenced new wave band, like they were on Something About You or Lessons in Love. They were actually a jazz funk-oriented group in the mold of Stanley Clarke and people like that. And these are their first two albums. There's a lot of instrumentals here. Band leader and bass player Mark King plays a lot on it, so it's more influenced by him, I guess, in a lot of ways. This is a compilation of their, well, actually, it's technically their third album, but in terms of release, their second. It's called The Pursuit of Accidents and Standing in the Light, 1983 and 82, this 82 to 83. These albums find them going more toward a pop punk kind of sound, a little bit less jazzy, but still the instrumentals are there, and it's still very much them. These here are transitional albums from Level 42. In this case, the transition is to this album, which is very abstract and Arabic, actually, and the subject matters of the songs are a little bit poetic and sometimes intense. And this is World Machine. Their big hit, Something About You, is on that. And all these albums have wonderful bonus tracks, unreleased material, remixes, you name it. They're really good with bonus cuts. I wish they weren't out of print, these twofers. This is the last of the twofers. This is Running in the Family from 1987. Actually, it was made in 86, if I understand it. And Staring at the Sun, 1988. These represent their last two albums of the 80s, and they are officially more of a pop band by this point. Somewhat less instrumentally oriented. Now, this guy is somebody who's very important you probably want to know about. He's been sampled a lot by hip-hoppers as breaks. Bernard Wright is part of the music scene from Jamaica, Queens in the early 80s. That included people like Lenny White and Weldon Irvin, who a lot of people probably haven't heard of. The jazz funk scene at the time, late 70s, early 80s. He was an early signing to GRP when he was a young man. You can see he's still a teenager here. And Nard, if you want to look up any of the songs on this album, and you're a hip-hop fan, you might find a lot of interesting things here. I'm not always one to make a big deal out of hip-hoppers trying to take the credit for, bringing the funk back to life or bringing more obscure music like this to the public eye through sampling. I wish it kind of got there on its own. But if hip-hoppers got it there, well, they're good archivists. I just wish sometimes they would, frankly, use a little bit better language on their records. I know it's a tired claim, but, it's not the morality. It's swearing just gets a little old after a while. Getting way off subject here. Anyway, this is a great album. A lot of instrumentals, a little bit of singing, even a cover of a Miles Davis tune on this album. Sorry, not Miles Davis. That's the next one. But excellent album, jazz funk album. This is Bernard Wright's second album, Funky Beat. And, he did cover Miles on the other album, sorry. On this one, the first half is more of like a breakdance kind of album. You can see by some of the hip-hop breakdance imagery on the cover. He even raps a little bit, but it's kind of about, the transition from jazz funk into more hip-hop sounds. Herbie Hancock was doing that, and this album caught him in a bit of a crossroads from that. So anyway, that's where that particular album is coming from. Next up is Teena Marie. Now, she died at the end of 2010, all too young, I'm afraid. This is one of her greatest albums, self-produced effort. her next to last effort for Motown. She had a hit on it called I Need Your Love, and the album is called Irons in the Fire. This also has Tune In Tomorrow. Look up Teena Marie, Irons in the Fire. Amazing artist, amazing vocalist, amazing musician, amazing writer, amazing everything. Very pretty, too. Anyway, another Teena Marie, same year, a little earlier. This is produced by Richard Rudolph, widower of Minnie Riperton, the late Minnie Riperton, father of SNL alum Maya Rudolph. He produced this album for Teena Marie. It has a song on it called Behind the Groove. The album is called Lady T. That was a nickname given to her by Rick James. Definitely an album you want to look up. And okay, here's another one. Steely Dan, Gaucho. All I have to say about this album starts out with Babylon Sisters and Hey 19. You all know Hey 19. You probably heard it a lot before. This is just an excellent album. I mean, it's Steely Dan. I can't really say much more about it. It should be pretty obvious why this is in my collection to most people, I suppose. Now, being a lover of Rod Temperton and Quincy Jones, I like to get pretty much anything that has one or both of them on it. Rod Temperton wrote the first half of this album for the Manhattan Transfer, jazz vocal group from the mid-'70s, early '80s. Still operating today, actually, but this album has a hit on it called Spice of Life. It's got that Rod Temperton, Quincy, Michael Jackson sound to it. They do some jazzy stuff on the other end of the album, but it's all still great enough to be one of my favorites. Very talented group there. This is another Manhattan Transfer album from 1979. This is actually one of their classics. It's called Extensions. It was produced by Jay Graydon, who did production for Al Jarreau. And this album has a Twilight Tone on it. And a cover of Birdland, the Weather Report song, a vocal version of that. Great vocal jazz album. This is the man then known and now again known as Prince. For a while, he was formerly known as Prince, but anyway, this is his first album. Now, the story goes is that when he first got signed to Warner, he wouldn't sign any contract unless he had carte blanche to write, produce, arrange, and play everything on the record. He has a detailed listing in this album of all of the instruments he plays, and each keyboard instrument. Very much of an egoist thing happening there. But anyway, that's Prince for you. This album is definitely an early version of the Minneapolis sound. There's a little Bee Gees there too, a little bit of, that late 70s sort of sound, Santana in there too, but that sound of Prince using the synthesizers for orchestration, somewhat like Gino Vanelli in a way, although Prince's language is a lot more lustful, I will say that. He's not quite as lustful as he would be in the 80s, but, earlier 80s, but anyway, this is definitely Prince's introduction to the world, and you can definitely tell it's him. He's got a distinctive sound right off the bat. So this is some excellent 70s Prince, actually one of only two 70s Prince albums worth hearing. This is another English group, trio, Loose Ends. They kind of sound like a somewhat harder edge Sade, a little bit like SOS Band. I don't know if you remember them. They had a hit on this album called A Little Spice, called Hanging on a String, Contemplating. It was actually such a strong song it became part of their next album, too. You should check that song out, Hanging on a String, Contemplating, or anything from A Little Spice by Loose Ends. Great group, great lyrical poetry from England. Great musical poetry, too. It's an album you should definitely seek out. This is Jean-Luc Patin. Now, he is an electric violinist from France, but this album, again, features a lot of synthesized orchestrations. Some people call it kind of new agey, but it isn't. It's very jazzy and very soulful and bluesy. George Benson's even on one of the cuts. I listen to this album when I'm in a mood to feel very creative. I find that it helps those juices a little bit get stimulated. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of this band, Midnight Star, because they had a hit in 1983 with No Parking on the Dance Floor. Well, this is their first album, done in 1980, and produced by Harvey Mason, one of Herbie Hancock's headhunters. It sounds more like Earth, Wind & Fire or Rick James or Shalimar or somebody like that. Doesn't sound like the Midnight Star most people know. They're actually a very organic band playing what you call real instruments at this time. But anyway, there's more to my collection coming up, so stay tuned.